Hey guys, welcome to Nerd Central. Today, I'm going to teach you how to solve a cubic equation. Hope you enjoy. Now let's get into the video. Cubic equations can be written in this form: ax cubed plus bx squared plus cx plus d. As you can see, I have an example cubic equation here that I'm going to show you how to solve. 2x cubed plus x squared minus 25x plus 12. So, the first step is to check if x equals 1 or if x equals negative 1. So, to check if x equals 1, you add all the coefficients, a, b, c, and d. So, the first coefficient, a, is 2. The second coefficient, b, is 1. The third coefficient, c, is minus 25. And the fourth coefficient, d, is 12. So if we add 2, 1, negative 25, and 12, you get negative 10. Negative 10 is not equal to 0. So you know x cannot equal 1. To check if x equals negative 1, you add up the opposite coefficients. So you add a and c, and you add b and d, and if a plus c equals b plus d, then you know x equals negative 1. So a is 2, and c is negative 25, and b is 1, and d is 12. 2 plus negative 25 is negative 23. 1 plus 12 is 13. Those two numbers are not equal. So we know x cannot equal 1, and x can also not equal negative 1. So now that we know that x cannot equal 1 and x cannot equal negative 1, we test other numbers to see if x can equal any of those numbers. So the first step for that is take this number as p and take this coefficient as q. And what you do is you factor p. So p can be factored as plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 6, and plus or minus 12. And then you take q, which can be factored into plus or minus 1 and plus or minus 2. And you divide these over each other. So first what you do is you divide each number by plus or minus 1. So you end up with essentially all of these numbers at the top all over again. So plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 4, plus or minus 6, and plus or minus 12. But then, when you divide it by plus or minus 2, you get different numbers. So 1 over plus or minus 2, you get plus or minus 1/2. Then, you get plus or minus 1, which we've already done, so we don't need to include that here. Then, you get plus or minus 3 over 2. We already have plus or minus 2, we already have plus or minus 3, and we already have plus or minus 6. So these are all the possibilities of what x could be. And using a method called synthetic division, we can check to see if x is any of these numbers. So, to start off, doing synthetic division, you have to kind of draw the same division symbol, except upside down, like this. And then you take the coefficients of the equation and put them here. So the first coefficient is 2, the next coefficient is 1, the next coefficient is negative 25, and the next coefficient is 12. If you're confused about what the coefficients are, they're A, B, C, and D, like how I showed you at the start. Like that. And then, so what you do is you see all of the numbers that could be x. You take any one of those numbers. So we're just going to start from the first number, plus or minus 1/2. So we'll just do positive 1/2. And so first, you just take the first coefficient and you just move it down to the bottom, and then you multiply the number at the bottom by the number you're testing to see if it could be x, which in this case is 1/2. So 2 times 1/2 is 1. So you put 1 here, and you add these two numbers. 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 times 1/2 is 1. And then negative 25 plus 1 is negative 24. Negative 24 times 1/2 is negative 12. And then 12 plus negative 12 is 0. Since the last number is 0, that means x equals 1/2. So if the last number wasn't 0, we would test any of these other numbers until we found one value of x where the last number is 0. So now that we know that x is equal to 1/2, we can find out the other values of x by using some of the answers we got from synthetic division and turning it into a quadratic equation. So we know that x equals 1/2. And then by substituting the three numbers 2, 2, and negative 24 into the coefficients of the quadratic equation, into the coefficients a, b, and c, we can get the quadratic 2x squared plus 2x minus 24. Then if we factor this quadratic, we get 2 times x minus 3 times x plus 4. And so, we also have this x equals 1/2, and we need to include that in the factored form of the cubic equation. So, what we can do is we need to make sure that this side is 0. So we can get x, we subtract 1/2 from both sides to get x minus 1/2 equals 0. Notice how this 1/2 isn't an integer, and it would be easier if it is. So we can take this 2 down here and multiply it into this x minus 1/2 equals 0 to get 2x minus 1 equals 0. And so now we have the full factor form of the cubic equation, which is 2x minus 1 times x minus 3 times x plus 4. And we can solve by just putting each of these in as x minus 3 equals 0. So x equals 3. X plus 4 equals 0. So x equals negative 4. And then we have our 3 solutions for x. Now, if you really want to make sure that this method works, you could multiply this out and you would get this cubic. Or you could substitute any of these values into the cubic equation and it would equal 0. So that's how to use synthetic division to solve any cubic equation. Hope you enjoyed. Like and subscribe if you did. And thank you for 100 subscribers.